Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'll have to go in rapid fire. Vice Chancellor, distinguished colleagues, friends all. I believe it is safe to say the science of climate change is virtually unchallenged in Guyana and the rest of the world. That there are natural forcings and anthropogenic forcings which together cause climate change, or climate changes are almost a truism today. I left some room for the skeptics. But equally important is the understanding that we do need greenhouse gases. We need them to protect us from solar radiation. What we do not need, however, is too much of it. Because too much greenhouse gases have the effect of trapping too much heat and excessively warming our planet, which is our current dilemma. Climate change has an impact on ecosystems, for example, biodiversity and carbon storage, an impact on human systems, including agriculture and fresh water, an impact on urban systems, transport, buildings, for example, an impact on economic systems, energy and natural capital, and Dr. Gardner will be talking about energy, and social systems, areas such as equity, migration, peace, and conflict. The impact of climate change is therefore pervasive. Enter the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This convention, whose objective is to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that will prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. Essentially, that's what it's all about. However, in essence, this is a mitigation statement requiring mitigation actions by nations directly responsible for climate change. However, the convention critically recognized that Guyana, among many other nations, bears no responsibility for this phenomenon and would, in effect, be required to adapt to climate change and benefit from new and additional financial resources from developed nations. At least that's how we began. The convention therefore set up an infrastructure for adapting to and financing climate change for countries such as Guyana, namely an adaptation agenda comprising the Nairobi Work Program, the Least Developed Countries Work Program, the Cancun Adaptation Framework, and the loss and damage mechanism. On the financial side, the convention set up the Adaptation Fund, the Special Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, and the Green Climate Fund. At the national level, Guyana established the Office of Climate Change, which is the focal point to the convention with responsibility for coordinating Guyana's adaptation actions to climate change. This brief background is important since Guyana's climate actions is heavily influenced by its own climate conduct and what appears to be a movement away from the initial focus of the convention, particularly by the Paris Agreement to the convention. The key activities of the Office of Climate Change in the context of managing Guyana's adaptation to climate change include developing capacities to observe climate and non-climate variables, to assess climate impacts and vulnerability, to plan adaptation measures, to implement them, and to monitor and evaluate national adaptation measures. Wrapped around these 5 actions are 2 key supporting mechanisms. 1, technological and financial support, and 2, technical and institutional capacities, in addition to stakeholder engagement and knowledge management to enhance knowledge sharing and learning. To get a sense of what adaptation means, the IPCC advises us that adaptation refers to adjustments in ecological, social, or economic systems in response to actual or expected climatic stimuli and their effects or impacts. It refers to changes in processes, practices, and structures to moderate potential damages or to benefit from opportunities associated with climate change. And I think it's important to recognize that you can benefit from climate change. And I will situate that shortly. Adaptation measures therefore translate into actions such as building flood defenses, setting up early warning systems for extreme weather, and switching to crops that fare better under drought and flood conditions, building coastline infrastructure, Hopefully I'm addressing Professor Manuel's point. Business operations and government policies. Adaptation commonly focuses on building resilience, reducing vulnerability to the impacts of climate change, and increasing adaptive capacity and coping range. This is what the Office of Climate Change, as the focal point, is primarily responsible for coordinating. This office continues to work on Guyana's adaptation measures, such as its NAMAs and its NAPs. I should also mention that recently the government of Guyana established the Department of the Environment, whose mandate is to coordinate all of Guyana's environmental actions through statutory bodies with environmental responsibilities, inclusive of climate actions. Though required only to adapt to climate change, the government of Guyana in 2009 launched its low carbon development strategy, essentially a mitigation plan to fund its adaptation efforts. The LCDS, as it is called, is a payment for ecosystems agreement between the government of Guyana and the government of Norway over a 5-year period to the value of $250 million United States dollars. It is based on sequestering our forests and releasing more than a predetermined amount of carbon into the atmosphere from forest activities, principally mining and forestry, and significantly reducing our carbon footprint via a constructed hydropower facility. The hydropower facility is still to be constructed. The 5-year period expired, and this project is now being executed under an extension. The extent to which Guyana's adaptation efforts are funded from its earnings under the Guyana-Norway Agreement is yet to be quantitatively assessed. It is safe to say, however, that the LCDS was a single sector contribution to climate change, or rather, climate change solution in Guyana. In 2015, the government of Guyana announced a transition to a green economy, building on the LCDS. This new initiative is multi-sectoral, involves sectors such as energy, transport, agriculture, economic and ecological systems, with significant reliance on renewable energy inputs such as solar, biomass, and hydropower inclusive. Importantly in this context was the identification of Bartica as the model for Guyana's first green town. Modeling the green economy is a key output for the Green Bartica Development and Land Use Plan. More recently, the government of Guyana has declared Guyana as transitioning towards a green state. And in that context, a green state development strategy is being crafted to operate as the enabling framework to drive the greening of Guyana's economy in order for it to achieve a green status. At the center of all these efforts are two essentials: finance and capacity building, mentioned by the Madam Chair. A brief look at the current international climate change regime puts into context Guyana's challenges. What we have observed over the past decade is an apparent movement from a commitment to fund climate change, particularly adaptation, from public sources to now private sources. What some writers refer to as the commodification of climate change solutions. There is perhaps no disagreement that private finance is a for-profit based system. The net effect is a particularly difficult challenge for countries such as Guyana to access these funds. Secondly, the Paris Agreement focused significantly on NDCs, my colleague mentioned, and meeting the agreed quantum of pledges to achieve the UNFCCC's 2-degree target. What we witness in this journey is the requirement of all countries to make pledges reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and that is certainly not the original intention or the original intended focus for states like Guyana under the convention. Nonetheless, we are pursuing this path. Thirdly, the Adaptation Fund, which was originally meant to be funded by public funds and act as a key adaptation bank, has been overtaken by the Green Climate Fund, which is being capitalized through significant private sources. Fourthly, adaptation measures do not bring in profits, much like mitigation actions. Examples, a renewable energy project. Generally, adaptation measures do not see a profit margin. Fifthly, the climate finance institutions have not provided new and additional finance resources as mandated by the convention. And many nations come overseas development assistance as climate finance contributions. Sixthly, the recent concluded Council Party 23 in Bonn has now introduced something called INSU, Resilience Global Partnership for Climate and Disaster Finance and Insurance Solutions, to increase coverage of the most vulnerable people against the adverse impacts of extreme weather events. This is now an insurance mechanism driven and controlled by the developed countries. It is not new and additional climate finance. This is another control mechanism and deviation from public funding of adaptation efforts. Again, against this national and international backdrop, Guyana's contribution to reducing climate change impacts and adaptation and mitigation would require significant obligated public finance flows for adaptation and private finance with regards to mitigation. Overall, mainstreaming adaptation and mitigation measures into the national budget appears to be a matter of course, given the endless debate on what constitutes new and additional financial resources. In that context, it is opposite to suggest that anticipated earnings from the oil and gas sector should fund Guyana's transition to a green economy and provide a mechanism for the greenhouse gas set-off to compensate for greenhouse gases emanating from this sector. And finally, in order for Guyana to continue to adapt to climate change, financial resources and development capacities continue to be critical. I thank you very much.